Hi, this is Phil Aston. I want to show you a new feature that I'm developing for the next release of the Grinder called the console service. Essentially, this is a RESTful API to the Grinder console which allows for all sorts of monitoring and automation of the behavior of the console and perhaps for integrating the Grinder with schedulers and continuous integration frameworks, and for monitoring the behavior of the Grinder through a web browser. So I've started up the normal Grinder console here. In 3.10, the console has a new option. It has a HTTP service port, and the default value is 6373. So in addition to the standard port 6372, where the Grinder agents connect to, this port controls where the console service listens. So I can point a browser at that and do something fairly simple, like ask for the version of the Grinder. And there we are. It's the Grinder version 3.10 snapshot because it's not yet released. Let's do something a little bit more interesting. Let's ask for console options. There we are. So those are all the console options or properties. I'll see various settings there. And if I change the settings here, so let's set the sample interval, that's something a little smaller, and refresh, then the sample interval changed. Good. So this is all well and good, but currently with a browser all you can do is get data from the console, and we're going to want to also modify the data and to send actions to the console service. So to do that, I'm going to use a command line tool called curl, but you can just as easily use my command line up. There we go. You could just as easily use a scripting language with a RESTful client API, or Java, or perhaps even the Grinder itself. So first of all, let's just repeat from the command line what we did from the browser. So do curl, and then we want the URL. Okay. And then we can also get the properties up. Great. Now, if you remember what we saw in the browser, you'll notice that the format of the return data is slightly different here. This is in JSON format, whereas this is a YAML format wrapped in HTML. And that's because the console service uses the accept header from the request to determine what format to use. So if we really want to, we can ask for it in YAML, for example. There we go, and we get it back in a different format. But throughout this demonstration, I'm going to continue just to use JSON, which is the default format. So what shall we do? Having got the properties, we notice one of them here is a little funky, the properties file. We're going to be using script distribution here, so that means we're going to collect all the scripts that we want and manage them locally to the console. You can see from the console user interface here, this is the currently selected script distribution directory. And one of the things that we need to do when we're using script distribution is to set to the Grinder properties file that we're using. So if I just open this here, you can see this is a standard sample Grinder properties file. And we need to make sure that that's selected. And if we look in the properties, currently that's set to something rather funky. So let's change that. And in order to change it, I need to issue an HTTP put request. Now by default, curl and the browser will be sending GET request, so let's change that. I also need to tell the service what format I'm supplying the data in, so I need to give it a content type header here, content type and tell it that it's JSON, and we're going to need to give it some new data. So to do that, I use -d and give it a JSON formatted map, which or a JSON object, and here the key is going to be properties file. So let's just copy that in, and the value is going to be grinder.properties. Now I could put more options in here if I have more to change, and when I issue that, the console service will return a response which says what did I change and what are the new values, and I can confirm that. If I go back to just the GET request, then here we can see the properties file has been set. So the next thing that I want to do is to start up an agent. So if I just switch this terminal window here, okay, and what shall we do? Right, so I'm going to do this from a temporary directory, because the agent would typically be running with its own local directory and its own local cache store, and possibly also on a completely different machine. And I'm going to start it here with the class path into my source tree, netgrinder. So there we go, we've connected to the console. I can confirm that in the user interface, and of course I can also confirm it from the command line using the console service, localhost 6373 agents status. There we are. So here we can see we've got one agent up and running, and that agent doesn't yet have any worker processes because we haven't started any. So before we start them, let's send the agent all of the files in the distribution directory. So all of these files. We currently the agent cache, where it keeps a copy of these files locally, the agent cache will be empty, and we can confirm that by asking what the file's status is. There we go. File status, the cache is stale, so we need to distribute the files to update the caches. So we do that by sending an action. So because it's an action, rather than actual data that we're supplying, we use the HTTP post method, and the action is called distribute. So that's started a file distribution. In fact, if I switch over to the agent terminal here, you can see that it's updated the file store with all of these files that are in this directory. We can also see that by going back to the file status command. I should just refresh the terminal so you can see that. And here we can see that the cache is no longer stale, and the last distribution is complete, and these are all the files that we've sent. So that's all good. So now we're going to start some worker processes. So just switch over the user interface to worker processes, to the process tab there, and let's see. So here's a command I prepared earlier. Again, we're sending it JSON formatted data. It's an action, so it's a post. The correct URL is worker start, and here we're saying we want to have 2 worker processes. Each of them is going to run 5 threads. We're going to run the hello world.py script, which is in the distribution, and we're going to set grinder.runs forever, set it to 0, which means run forever, so the workers will just continue until they're told to stop. All that hello world.py does, let's have a quick look at the script first. So all that this script does is Python the script, and it repeatedly calls this log wrapper proxy, which will log out hello world to the grinder log file, and log wrapper has instrumented the standard log method in test1, so we will see how long it takes to do that logging recorded against the test1. There we go, I issue the request, it's come back a success, and the user interface is updated as the workers start running to say, okay, we're running 2 worker processes, 5 threads each, and we can see data coming in, we see data here logged against test1. Now of course you can also see that all through the console service. So first of all, let's go and check the agent's status. There we are. Now here we can see we have 1 agent, and that agent is running 2 workers. And of course we can also see that in the browser. We just find the browser out. Where is it? In a slightly nicer format. Right. Now all of this information is being recorded, and you can see in the data accumulated there. We can check the recording status, and we can see we've done 62 samples there, and we're recording, and we can also get the data. So every time I issue this command, we'll get the latest data, and you can see the numbers are slowly changing there, and that corresponds to the data that we're seeing here. So we've done 5 million tests there. You can see the number down here as well, so if I show that again, there we go, nearly 6 million. Right, so in order to get a stable set of data that we can report against, let's stop the recording. So we do that by issuing an action, so it's a post against recording stop. There we go, the collection has stopped. The worker processes are still running. So they're still running away in the background, chewing up CPU, but we can get the data. Recording data, and it says get. Okay, this is a little bit slow because the worker processes are on the same CPU here, and we can record that data, and we can reset the worker processes, or essentially reset the agent, so that we're ready to do a new run. And to do that, let's just reset the terminal bit. Reset. We issue a post to workers reset. Okay. So that's all I have to show you today. I hope you enjoyed this demonstration. I'm quite excited about the console service. I think it satisfies a number of use cases which I know people have asked for over the years, and there was a fledgling undocumented API called the Console API that allowed you to do some of these things through a Java API. However, the console service is really a superset of the features of the console API, and I will shortly, I think, be once the console service is bedded in, I'll be removing the console API in favour of the console service. So the feature will be released in the next version of the Grinder 3.10, and I suspect that will probably be released in something like 4 to 6 weeks. So look out for it. Bye for now.